Right. Now let's work on our control. Our controller, which is a part of the Grant Imahara Coding Challenge, is a 3-button controller. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to use that controller to initiate one of the loops that you have already built. By this point in time, you should have a dome that is moving panels back and forth, lights are blinking, and sounds happening, which, by the way, congratulations, that's a big step. If that's happening for you, great. Now we want to be able to control that, right? So we want to be able to write some code. So when we hit a button, it does what we want it to do. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to set up these 3 buttons. And when we hit that button, it's going to initiate the loop that you've already been working on. So I'm going to go through some of the live code here, excuse me, that has the I've already inputted the information about the controller in with all the other code that we've been working on to this point. The objective is to kind of show you what I'm doing, how you could alter this for yourself, what you could change. Just because I'm using 3 switches doesn't mean you can't use 1, 2, 4, 5, whatever. How many pins you have in the Arduino, it's how many you could use. Now, I'm not using any kind of pull-up resistors. And if you look at the wiring diagram on the switch, or the controller, I mean, it is very simple. And I've tried to develop a series of code that I feel is very simple to manage and understand. There's other ways of doing this that are probably better, but this is what I've come up with. And I think this gives students an understanding of how to call loops, which is what I was really trying to do by pushing a button. So let's get to it. So first off, right below the DF Robot Player Mini, we're going to add some new functions. So we're going to put in switch1.pin. So SW_pin, you can call that anything you want to, but we basically need to have some kind of variable we're assigning to pins 5, 6, and 7. Those are what the 3 buttons are to the controllers being associated to. So you'll see us reference SW1, SW2, and SW3 pin from time to time. So that needs to go into the code someplace in this spot before setup. Next, we have 3 things that we're doing here. We are looking at the switch. We're calling it SW1, 2, and 3. We're looking at the button state and the last button state. So these are what a Boolean is just really a value being held. And Booleans are either true or false. So we're looking at switch 1's going to be false at start. So we're turning it off. Switch 1, don't do nothing right now. I want you to do something when I press you, but nothing right now. Okay. Same with these integers, which are basically just prime numbers. INT stands for integer. And it's a prime number, which is why we have zeros over here. We have button state 2 and 3. And the last button state we're going to be checking with some code at the very end of this page. All 3 of these will be here for all 3 switches if you want all 3 switches to work. If you just want 1 switch, you would just use one of these. Okay. We need to set up the input pull-up resistor code on pin mode. That is right here. So we do that. And so basically what's happening here is this pin mode. Normally we can be an output or an input. When this input is pull-up, and really what it's doing is it's monitoring the state of the pin to look for some change. So really this is mostly used for buttons or switches or those kind of things. It's monitoring the serial communication. And so that little piece of code is going to really help us in determining when we hit that button, it does a thing. Okay. So that's very important to have in our setup. So we're setting up that pins for switch pins. So that's going to be SW1, 2, and 3. If you look up here, SW1, 2, and 3 was what? That is 5, 6, and 7. So those are the pins we need to have where the button's hooked to. Okay. I already talked about that. Now we get down to here and we're setting up a couple things in the loop. First off, we're going to be doing a check if SW1 button is pressed. So you can see here, kind of tabbed everything over a little bit. This check is happening at the bottom in one of our structures. So right now we're going to type this in and then make some changes at the bottom of the page. We're also adding in something new. So you can see right here, this is new. So let me explain this. First off, this should look pretty familiar. This is what you currently probably have close to it inside your current command, right? You're moving a motor, you're blinking a light, you have a 3-second delay, who knows, you're turning some lights off, moving some motors again, and then you're playing a sound, and then you're taking a 4-second delay. Okay. Well, this doesn't just run. And now what's happening is we're using some Boolean logic. If SW1, well, what we're looking for is if SW1 is pressed, and that's what we're going to be looking at here in the bottom. And if that is equals false, we're going to be executing that information. That's going to change when we press the button. But right now we need to set it to false so that it doesn't just run all the time. Okay, so we'll be checking these things and be changing SW1 down at the very bottom of the page. Now this right here is a serial print line. The only reason this is even in the code is just to see when I was doing some checking, if I hit the button on the Arduino controller inside the computer, I could see if it's pressed or not. So I was just doing some checking. You could leave that in there, take it out. So we're going to do one for SW1, SW2, because after we do one if, we do an else if. So the second if is an else if, and we do another else if. You keep doing else ifs all the way down. And each one of those switches, we put in a different type of command, you know, where now I'm going to move some motors and but I'm not blinking anything in switch 2. And you can see I freedom to do what I want to do. So you can do what you want to do. You can move 2 motors. Maybe you only have 1 motor in there. Maybe you have all the motors in there, you know, 6 or something. I don't know. You do whatever you want to, and that's kind of the goal of the project. Okay. So once you've done that in the loop, we now have to set up another void, another structure. And this is check if switch 1 button is pressed. So we're going to set up 3 of these because we have 3 checks. That's up here at the very top of the page. We looked at that a second ago. Check if button is pressed, 1, 2, and 3. So now we're going to have to set up a couple things to look if the button state changes. So that's where these button states and last button states come from. So switch button state equals the digital read of switch 1 pin. If the button state is red, then we're going to turn that daggone thing to true. When it turns true, it's going to immediately initialize what's in the loop and play that. Now, based upon the delays, there's a half-second delay here. When you hit a button and you hit another button right away, it may not play it because it's still executing the loop. So the button presses that we make on the controller, you have to wait a second after you hit a button and it does its thing, so it resets. There's a second, half a second delay in the button presses to let everything reset so you can hit a button again to do a new thing. So if that happens, just be aware of that. All right, so basically that's all we're doing. We're doing each one of these if button presses. They're all pretty much the same, and we're checking, and once that we notice that that has changed, we change that value to true. So kind of, I know I went through that pretty quick, but I'll flip through that a little bit slower so that everybody can see that. So this is if button is if switch 1 is pressed. This here is if switch 2 is pressed. This is if switch 3 is pressed. And that is it. Easy peasy, the lemon squeezy. Good luck, everybody. I hope that you've had fun building your mini domes. I hope you have enjoyed understanding a little bit of this code. Hopefully you now know how to move a motor, blink a light, play some sounds, and now you could do that with a wired remote control. You can continue to advance your knowledge and make it wireless and or have lights, laser lights coming out of the domes or whatever you want to do. Make something else. It doesn't matter. You now have some skills in that space. Good luck to you. It has been my absolute pleasure to have helped you through this process. I'm Dr. Montgomery. Goodbye.